seeing where the therapeutic aspect of plant medicine could go, who are the major players in that field, and what can we learn from them, and how can they advise us into developing our own programs to serve that need. So, we developed our integration program with the guidance and advice of several psychologists, and we integrated actual clinical psychologists into our team. So we now have people working with psychologists. We've developed an integration program, which, was kind of a phase one, and then we did a phase two revision. Melissa's actually really investing a lot of time and energy in this right now, into developing a fully kind of comprehensive integration platform that's going to allow different tracks for people to pursue related to their own personal talents, not just integrating ayahuasca or plant medicine in a general way, but in a more specific way related to what they want to do. So we really wanted to explore and help to further the field in that way.
Hey, listeners, welcome back to Third Waves Podcast. Today, we have Daniel Cleland, who is an international entrepreneur, traveler, and author of the book, Pulse of the Jungle, Ayahuasca, Adventures in Social Enterprise in the Amazon. Daniel is also the founding partner, chairman, and CEO of Soltara Healing Center, what I would consider to be the gold standard of ayahuasca retreat centers. And Daniel not only has his own podcast, but he also just started a heavy metal band, Savage Existence, which we'll get into deeper into the podcast. So Daniel, thanks for joining us for Third Waves Podcast.
Great seeing you, Paul, and thank you for the invitation. Really appreciate it. And it's good to be here with you.
It's good to be here with you. We first met almost 3 years ago now. I came down to Soltara for a week of my own healing, and it was the first place that I had been that weaved in Shipibo healing, because I've never had the chance to sit in Peru. I'd been to Rhythmia and I'd been to one other center before yours. And what I found to be so beautiful about Soltara is weaving in the indigenous knowledge, the indigenous wisdom, the indigenous way of being, and doing it in a stunning setting with views over the ocean, with not luxurious, but really well done accommodations with air conditioning, great food. And I found that so much of the path, so to say, is finding the middle way, right? Like that's what the Taoists often talk about, is how do we just find the middle way? And what Soltara has done better than any other retreat center is finding the middle way. So I want to first congratulate you on all the effort and energy that you've put into that, because I know it's been a one hell of a build.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely been a really brilliant and wonderful journey, not without its challenges, not without significant challenges, not without significant highs as well. And I just wanted to comment that when you came here, there were half of the rooms that we have now. So we've definitely made some upgrades to the luxury aspect of the center. We've got a number of new rooms that are. We added a new tier actually for the people who do appreciate a little bit more in the way of luxury. And I went around and picked out the marble and granite and the all that kind of good stuff. So it's a little bit more luxurious now, although still grounded in the roots of the indigenous traditions. And I appreciate that compliment, us being able to find the middle ground. It's certainly been one of the primary objectives since the beginning. And we earned our stripes in the jungle, in the Amazon jungle, living in Peru, living in the Amazon. In fact, so deep in the Amazon that we were 4 hours away from the nearest city, in a place called Libertad, which is a small village right on the Ucayali River, on the border of actually kind of sandwiched between the Pacaya Samiria National Reserve and the Yarapa National Reserve. And so so that was my first kind of endeavor into this world of actually running a retreat center. And that's where, myself and Melissa Stangl got our breadth of experience actually working with the medicine in this context, working with, indigenous healers, people healers in that setting, living in the jungle in a very, very rustic and very jungle bound setting. So we really took that base of experience and transplanted it along with a lot of our network and our community, and even healers and methodology that we took from there, and we moved it up to Costa Rica into a jungle bound setting, which is also on the beach in Costa Rica, which also, as you know, Costa Rica offers a lot more in the way of access, in the way of safety and security, in the way of development and just ease of operation, so the idea was to, yes, create a more comfortable jungle experience and not lose the essence of the work that we're doing, while also not sacrificing some of the creature comforts that, let's be frank, I mean, most of our customers are from affluent Western backgrounds, or especially with Soltara, we have a lot of people who are average age kind of 40 years old, and busy people who have jobs that pay well, and they don't have a lot of free time, so they want to come to a place that is convenient and easy to get to, but that doesn't feel artificial. And so, yes, I believe that we've done okay in creating that scenario.
You've done quite well. And I want to dive deeper into Soltara because I know that is the crux of your energy. And yet, what I want to first explore and have our audience have a bit of insight into is how a kind of badass, you almost look like you could be like like a football linebacker, from Ontario. How did a guy like you end up in the jungle in Peru, 4 hours from the nearest sort of whatever, starting your first ayahuasca retreat center? What tell us a little bit about that through line.
Yeah, sure. So my heavy metalness, I guess, began back in high school. So that has kind of come full circle, and is not really relevant to the story of how I got into ayahuasca, but just to preempt the story with that. I mean, I've really always, since about the age of 16, kind of been a bit of a maverick, I guess you can say. And I went through the kind of natural progression of upbringing in middle class Canada, going to college, finishing high school barely, going to college, and kind of not really finishing college, but then getting into the work world, and I ended up getting into sales because that was the path of least resistance for me at the time, really. And getting out of this really illustrious party atmosphere of high school and college, and then getting into the professional world, it started to get, I guess, I started to see the straight linear future that I had in front of me, that almost like 99% of my friends were on, which was, okay, now we're done college. Now we're done the party scene. Now we work for 30 years, 9 to 5. And, if we're lucky, in a year or two, we get to, put a down payment on a house, and then spend the next 30 years paying off a house, and marry our high school sweetheart and have a bunch of kids. And essentially that's life. And to me, that seemed just really unattractive. And so when I was 25, kind of arriving to that future reality that seemed just like a given, and that all of my friends were just naturally moving into it. It really kind of scared me, and in a way it repelled me. And so once I started to get locked into that, I decided I wanted to keep the adventure going. So I started traveling in South America, and that opened up a new world for me. And so I kept at that. I started working in tourism when I was 25 in South America, because I wanted to explore the world. I wanted to live a different life than the kind of cookie cutter existence that so many people I knew were just naturally falling into. So I spent a couple of years traveling around South America, working in tourism, guiding groups around in a handful of different countries. Actually, coincidentally, I started in Costa Rica and Panama, then moved down to Venezuela and Brazil and Argentina, Uruguay, and Colombia, Ecuador, and got some experience knocking around down there and all that. After that, I desired a more professional existence, so I went back to Canada and got back into school and tried to increase my education. And that led me to a trip in Australia, a field trip for the university, which, long story short, was kind of catastrophic and really took me off the rails. Ended up getting off track in a big way with my education, and then ended up having a large accident, which was almost killed me. Actually, I spent 40 days in the hospital, and during that time, was almost 30 years old and kind of having a midlife crisis or whatever. So I realized that at that time that my life was super off track, and I was not doing a very good job of stewarding my own existence at that point. So I got into ayahuasca, to, as do many other people who come to see us at Soltara, looking for a change, looking for a big change, looking for some help to really find the path and really find what to do in life, because life can be confusing. Life can be difficult. Life can be painful. Life can be heartbreaking. And sometimes we just don't know what to do next, or the next step to take. So that's the position I found myself in. And it was a really dark period in life. And at that time, I was actually really afraid of ayahuasca. I'd heard about it. This was back in 2009, 2010. And I'd heard about it, but was very afraid of doing it. But you know what they say, a person won't change until the pain of staying the same exceeds the pain of change. So, I had nowhere to go but up. And so I bit the bullet, and I went to find an ayahuasca retreat, which I did in 2010, and it had immediately profound effects on me and my mentality, and on the healing that I needed at the time, and on, more than anything, just like dropping the baggage of the past. I was carrying so much baggage from the past that was contaminating my present, and by extension my future. So that first experience with ayahuasca was so absolutely profound and powerful that it got me into the world of ayahuasca, and I wanted to continue working with ayahuasca. And fortunately, as I explained, I already had this background in working in tourism in South America, so I already had this basis of language and of familiarity with the cultures of South America, and of travel, and of working with groups, taking tourists around, making sure they're well taken care of, etc. So when I wanted to work with ayahuasca more deeply, and I didn't have any money, I was able to leverage that previous tourism experience to start taking groups down to South America. And that would essentially just subsidize my own continued practice with ayahuasca, my own continued exploration into the world of ayahuasca. And that got me working with several different traditions down in South America. And that just became my thing. It just became a passion. And for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, it became just kind of a side project in terms of business. Just, while I was working full time, and I actually ended up going back to upgrade my education in Canada. While at the same time, as a side project, I had my little website and my blog, and was taking groups of people down to South America to work with medicine and continue my own practice. And then in 2013, I came to a crossroads in my, I guess, professional career, where I was working another sales job, and I just got tired of working for other people, and I got tired of doing the 9 to 5, and I was finishing a degree. I was finishing a master's degree, and there was some momentum and some traction going on with my side project, being Pulse Tours, which is the first company that I started. And so, I decided to quit the full-time job I had. I finished the degree, and I dedicated all my efforts, utilizing some of the student loans I got for university, to kind of fund the initial stages of Pulse Tours, and started leading more groups, and hired a couple of tour leaders. And then I had a small company. And in 2014, that got busy enough that we were starting to have trouble with getting reservations at other centers. So I built my own center in the Amazon, in this place called Libertad. And out of necessity, but that did pretty well. It did okay. And that was the basis for the journey that brought us to this point here, really.
Let's get a little bit deeper into that, because the last part of this, you just sort of like casually gloss over, but you built a retreat center in the Amazon out of necessity. There's one other story that I think of, and it's Joe Tafour's story, where he went down to, and built Nihao Rao, and, apprenticed there, and a very different path, because he was coming from a very medical background and you were coming from a much more entrepreneurial background. But I'm hearing there's similar sort of intentions and overlaps. And so I'd love if you could just bring us into, like, what was that like to build a retreat center in the Amazon? What did you prioritize? What were some of the challenges and difficulties? Kind of bring us into that world, that story.
Sure. And it's interesting you bring up Joe, because we're good friends. And actually, when I was leading my first groups down there, I was taking them to Joe's place, to Niue Rao, right? And actually, I poached my first full-time shaman from Niue Rao. Well, that's kind of a lie. They let him go, and I was like, yo, you need a job. But actually, my first objective was to build some space at Niue Rao in a second Maloka. Like I had negotiated kind of a deal with Joe and with Svita, who was his business partner at the time, along with Ricardo. And, we were going to do that until one night Joe had a ceremony, and he basically said, you know what? I think it's best if you go build your own place. So I was in the ceremony with him. So I already had the kind of potential location. When I was taking people to Joe's place for ayahuasca, because of my tourism background, I wasn't just doing ayahuasca retreats. I was doing like a trip, right? So I would take people. There was one trip. I had a few different trips, but for example, there was one that was, we'd start in Bogota, Colombia, fly down to Leticia, Colombia, which is like right on the border with Brazil and Peru in the Amazon, and do a little trip there, and then visit Brazil and visit go into Peru and go up the Amazon River, get to Iquitos, and then go to Joe's place. And then there were other trips that we'd go right into Iquitos and then spend a few days in the jungle in this area, this Libertad, right? So like the common place to take people on jungle expeditions from Iquitos was Pacaya Samiria, the nature reserve, Pacaya Samiria. And so when I did trips in Iquitos, like let's say there was an 8-day trip, we would spend 2 or 3 days out in Pacaya Samiria in this like jungle paradise, like far, you have to drive 2 hours from Iquitos to the only town connected by road called Nauta. You'd have to jump on a boat. You'd have to go down the Marañón River to the intersection of the Ucayali, and then go up the Ucayali. So it's like a remote place, like surrounded by thousands of kilometers of just pristine jungle. So I was already like taking people out there for group tours to get them primed up for their ayahuasca retreat. So what we do is we go out into the jungle as a group and hang out for a few days and go see all the animals and go experience the real raw jungle with a jungle guide, kind of spend a few days together as a tribe, kind of getting everything, getting everybody on the same page. And then we go to Joe's place and then do a few ceremonies at Joe's place, right? Like at Niue Rao with Ricardo as the shaman. And so throughout that process of doing that multiple times, I met the people from this village, right? So there was just a small jungle lodge in that village, but it was like the jumping off point for jungle expeditions. So I had already talked to them. My jungle guide, Victor, at the time made an intro to the village president or mayor. And, we checked out some property right adjacent to the village. And he's like, yeah, you can use this if you want to build a center here, just to, employ the people from our village and we'll give it to you for free. So that was already on the table, except I had a lot of resistance because I knew it was going to be a hell of a lot of work and a lot of risk. And like, I didn't have the money for it. So it was like, okay, it scared me. So I thought an easier entry point into that was cut a deal with Joe and Svita and Ricardo and just build a little, like a second Maloka and some space on their property and bring my people there when necessary, like when needed. When we would come there, we would have our own space, because the difficulty I was running into at the time was that I would I would need to run a group of 10 people to make it viable. But then I would try to book 10 people at their place or at any other place, which at first, in like 2011, 2012 was like not nearly as busy, but come 2013, 2014, much busier. And if I would try to book 10 people, they'd be like, okay, if we need you to pay us up front for it, because we have other people who want those spots. Right. So I didn't have the money to pay up front. And if I did, it would be a bad business decision to pay for 10 people and then only be able to sell 6 spots. And then I would have to basically pay for 4 blank spots on the. So anyways, that was the issue I was butting up against. But yeah, when Joe said it was best for me to go and build my own place, then that's what I did. I already kind of had the location sussed out. I just had resistance to doing it because of the difficulty of doing it and the investment, which I didn't have. So when we decided to pull the trigger, it was pretty much like I was finishing my master's degree. So I had a little bit of ammunition there in terms of raising money. The business was a couple of years old, and it was growing. We had a strong positioning on Advisors, which is the kind of trip advisors of times past for ayahuasca retreat. And I had customers already booked, but I didn't have a place to take them. So I pitched my dad on loaning me some money, and he wouldn't have done it in the past, but because I had just completed my master's degree, which was a 2-year slog, while I was also working full time and also building my company, right? Plus the company was already showing traction. Plus I had spent the previous 2 years investing the money that I was earning by working full time in the company. I had some skin in the game. So he's like, okay, you're showing positive signs here. Plus you just got your master's. So even if you fail, I'm pretty confident you can come back to Canada and get like a 6-figure job with your degree and pay me back. So he gave me a small loan of $20,000, which I combined with the revenue that I was getting from bookings, and I put that into building Maloka and a lodge at this site that I had found at this village of Libertad, out in that jungle hotspot where I was already taking people to do jungle trips. So it was like it was a very unique place because it wasn't just about medicine. It was like medicine and you're exploring the deep jungle in a touristic context. So I called it the Ayahuasca Adventure Center, not because you're getting an ayahuasca adventure, but because you're like doing ayahuasca and having a jungle adventure. But it was super legit. I hired a head shaman from Joe's Place from Niue Rao. And we did well, man. It was a pretty big hit. We had a great time. We had great people working with us. I think Tatiana, my ex, who helped me a lot in that endeavor. We pretty much stayed at the top of Advisors for the whole time, and it was all pretty good, except there's a unique set of challenges to living in Iquitos. I don't know. Have you ever been to Iquitos?
I have not. No, I've only been to Rio Branco for the ayahuasca conference in 2016.
In Brazil.
I have not been in Brazil. Yeah, but I haven't been to Iquitos. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Iquitos is not my favorite place on earth. It's just not even close to my favorite place on earth. I loved being in the jungle. I loved that place, and it was heartbreaking to let it go. And I feel like that's kind of like a repressed memory because it was so special to me, and the whole like that being my first big thing, it was just such a bright experience. But after a few years of living in the jungle, and more than anything, not having really feasible logistical hub nearby. Like, so Iquitos was our logistical hub, but man, Iquitos is terrible. It's just it's a terrible place. It's filthy. It's polluted. It's noisy. Nothing works. And the people there, what I found was that being a business owner in the local area, I couldn't trust anybody. Like it was just impossible. I was constantly being manipulated. I was constantly being cheated. I was constantly, people trying to sell me drugs or whatever, just like people asking me for money, like I'd walk around. It was just a big flashing red kind of target on my back for just all kinds of nefarious things. So I mean, by the end, I didn't even want to leave my house because if I did, it was like, it would take me 5 minutes before someone's going, "Hey, Dad, yeah, hey, man, you want to buy some cocaine, man?" Or like whatever, just. give me some money now. Yeah. Like just constantly stuff like this. So yeah, I did not like Iquitos, but it was inescapable. And so, I absolutely love the center and love the work we did there and love the jungle and love the village of Libertad, it was not a long-term viable option for me to personally stay there. So I tried to kind of put other people in charge of it and then expand my horizons elsewhere. I went to the States. I tried to start another plant medicine business there in Kratom. But I kept getting these calls like, yo, you need to come down here and solve this thing. So I'd be in the States and then I get a call that's like, you got to come down here. There's an emergency. So then I'd have to fly from Austin to Houston to Lima, spend a night in Lima, fly from Lima to Iquitos, spend a night in Iquitos, jump on a boat or jump in a shitty taxi, drive 2 hours to Nauta, jump on a boat, go 2 hours to the center. It was just it became impossible for me to do anything else while still having that center. And I didn't want to be there full time. And there were some cracks starting to form amongst the team just because, I wasn't there and people were getting other ideas. And it was just I saw the
there
needs.
wasn't the strong leadership there that kept everything together. So you started to see a fractalization.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes. Cracks beginning to show. So I ended up basically having to sell it. And actually I sold it to some of the people who were trying to snipe the shaman, one of the things where customers were coming in and the shaman was negotiating with them, trying to yo, I want to go start my own place. You want to invest? You know what I mean? So it was so it's either I have to replace the shaman or I have to, and what I decided on was, okay, well, I'll just, instead of doing that, I just said, okay, look, you guys buy the place. You want to start your own place, buy it from me and take it, So another guy bought it and gave the shaman a piece of it. And, they're still running it to this day under a different brand name. And then, so I left and I was definitely done with Peru and came up to Costa Rica and started a new place in a place that's more feasible for long-term lifestyle enjoyment.
And so then, thank you for sharing that. And I love how detailed you go into it because it really gives a sense of the excitement that you went into that project with and sort of the hard work that you've put into not only that project, but all of your projects. And how it's largely been, I know you've taken on, some investment, but it's largely been a bootstrapped operation where you have taken your energy and just applied it because you thought this was important. And you're not a overly sort of sensitive guy. And yet I can tell from all the effort and energy that you put in that this means so much to you because not only of how impactful it was for you, but how impactful you've noticed ayahuasca is for so many people. So I want to applaud you in that. And then what I also want to open up is just, what were three sort of reflections, insights where, when you were starting Soltara as this new project, three core things that you took away from your first project that you wanted to shift or adapt as you were stepping into Soltara, which I feel like is sort of your magnus opus in a way, and what you're continuing to grow and cultivate as that magnus opus.
Yeah, definitely. Great question. Well, one thing is permanence. I think is the one predicate that we went into this project with. What really surprised me about selling the center in Peru was how deeply it impacted me emotionally, because it felt like I was selling people out that I cared about. I mean, which is actually just the truth. And like, we put so much effort into building something so beautiful that was helping so many people, including, not the least of which the local community there in Libertad, of just fantastic people that work so hard for us. And, so we didn't disintegrate it, which was good. We just sold it to someone else who kept it going. But part of letting it go was just related to emotion and identity. Especially, I didn't expect the identity aspect to hit me so hard, but it did. And the emotional impact of letting that place go. Hey, Jess, you want to hit the lights here, bud? Some light on me. The emotional impact of letting that go was super intense. So entering into Soltara, we came into it as like, this is going, like, we're going to be here when we're 100. Like, this is, we're starting this. We're not selling out. I don't care what happens. We are running this place permanently. So the objective was sustainability and longevity, to make sure that regardless of what happens, we're not going to do anything reckless. We're not going to do anything temporary. We're not going to do anything, just simply market based as a reaction to like a surge in demand or whatever. Like, we're going permanently on this. So that was one thing that gave us kind of a different mindset in a way when we started this. Second, so you asked for three things. Second was really trying to create a sense of accessibility and bridging between cultures, between physical locations as well. Like the fact that being in Costa Rica is not only a metaphorical bridge, but a physical bridge between South America and North America, right? So we wanted to be able to open up the access to an authentic experience to more people who might not be in the category of people who want to actually venture deep into the Amazon jungle, right? Because that's a mission, and it also requires a certain amount of commitment. And then the third thing was really engaging the scientific community as well, developing programs that were more based on where the field of healing itself is going from kind of a therapeutic and a scientific perspective. Not so much in the way of like scientific research, but we have participated in scientific research with Imperial College and with University of Atlanta in Georgia and various other organizations. Most recently, a veterans organization that came and was doing some scientific research here, but really kind of seeing where the therapeutic aspect of plant medicine could go, and who's the major player, who are the major players in that field, and what can we learn from them, and how can they advise us into developing our own programs to serve that need. So we developed our integration program with the guidance and advice of several psychologists, and we integrated actual clinical psychologists into our team. So we now have people working with psychologists. We've developed an integration program, which was kind of a phase one, and then we did a phase two revision, and now we're working on a full. Melissa's actually really investing a lot of time and energy in this right now, into developing a fully kind of comprehensive integration platform that's going to allow different tracks for people to pursue related to their own personal talents, not just integrating ayahuasca or plant medicine in a general way, but in a more specific way related to what they want to do. So we really wanted to explore and help to further the field in that way. So I think like ultimately it really came down to a massive commitment that was permanent and more committed to the field of work in general. And then also just really trying to open up an authentic experience to people who only wanted to come to Costa Rica, not Peru, where before us there was somewhat of a lack in like an intimate experience with indigenous healers similar to what one might find in the Amazon.
And then the third thing was the scientific. So we have the permanence, the accessibility, and then more of a weaving in of the scientific research. And that was, those three things, or at least the accessibility and the weaving in of scientific research, and also the beautiful setting, on the beach, was what drew, me in initially when I went. And I think a lot what draws in a lot of folks, because you were saying this at the beginning of the podcast, you do now have more luxurious accommodations. And even when I was there, they were still luxurious is relative, but they were really nice accommodations. And I think you've just continued to build on that. And from what I understood, you are also continuing to build out, things to make it accessible and affordable. So it's not just like a, sort of, well, I won't name names, but a kind of bougie retreat center for the ultra wealthy. There's sort of a bridging of a gap there as well in terms of accessibility. And you bring us into the chronological timeline quickly. When did you break ground? When did you start accepting folks for the retreat? And just how has that grown in the last little bit?
Sure. So I somewhat tried to utilize the same bootstrapping formula that I used for the first center, except where I needed to borrow 20,000 for the center in Peru, I needed to raise 2 million for the center here, right? So a big difference. However, fortunately, I had kind of built up a track record with the center in Peru and the success of that, and that was kind of the proving ground, I guess you can say. So coming up to raise the money for this, I raised about half the money from customers that went through the center in Peru who had already experienced our service, and they were like 100% confident. They stepped up, they put money in, believing in the cause, and also they got special access to the center. They get certain amount of free days a year, along with having ownership of the company and stuff like that. The other half basically came from people in my family or friends of the family who, including my dad, who were impressed by the transformation they saw in me over the years, knowing me when I was a huge loser before I took ayahuasca, and then seeing the steady and kind of accelerated improvements in my life after I started getting into ayahuasca, right? So while they were beforehand super anti-drugs and like super like Nixonites, not Nixon, sorry, Reaganites, and like very much born in the 50s and kind of grew up in conservative Canada in the 70s, and we're kind of like anti druggy kind of vibe, and they didn't understand what I was getting into in the beginning, but then they saw the actual results, and not only that, not just in my life, but started to see mainstream media take this stuff up. Gabor Mate, David Suzuki, Toronto Star, like a lot of these guys who are family and friends are Canadians, right? Because they watched me grow up in Canada and then get into this stuff, and they've been following me for years. So that was kind of the first thing, was raising the money, but at the same time, I still tried to bootstrap it, and I didn't raise enough money from the beginning. I had to go back to the well a few times, kind of in an emergency way, as it sometimes happens. But we the time of me selling the Peruvian location and the time of me starting to negotiate this location overlapped by a few months. I came up to Costa Rica in, I think, June of 2017 because I was lamenting the sale of the Peruvian location, not because I wanted to continue running it, but because the sale of it was impacting people I cared about, being like, the staff who worked with me down there, including Melissa and Tatiana. They were both not happy about really the new owner and how he was managing things and changing the vibe, basically. So I felt kind of shitty because I basically sold them out. I didn't want to be down there and I didn't want to manage it. And so I sold the place, yet they, the idea was they would continue to work there and they didn't like the new guy. So I was lamenting that and I didn't feel good about it. And I was trying to brainstorm any way to somehow blow up that deal or somehow like take back what I did. But really the fact remained, I didn't want to go back down to Iquitos, like not at all, like never, like not even one more time in my life. So I was like, okay, I was with my dad and I was moving some stuff out of Texas and he was taking some of the stuff that I had in Texas. He was just going to take up to his place in Canada and utilize. So we were hanging out in Texas together and he's like, why don't you just like take your people and go up to Costa Rica and do something there? I'm like, man, I don't know. It'd be so hard. It's so many like moving parts and blah, 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 blah. And then he looks up, he spends about like 2 minutes on the internet, finds this property and he's like, check this place out. Shows me his laptop, which is actually the property Soltara is built on right now. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that could be pretty good. It kind of has this, you've been to the restaurant. It's kind of like a Maloka, the restaurant. It's like got this cone shaped roof. So I'm like, you could almost do ceremonies in there, So I got interested in that. And like maybe a month later, me and him went to check it out. And then it just, as soon as I got there, I'm like, oh, this is definitely the place. Like this is going to blow people's minds. So I had the vision as soon as I got there. And then the next few months, we're just negotiating the deal with the seller and talking to the municipality, making sure we could do what we wanted to do and all that kind of stuff. And then in November that year, signed the deal, started building in December. And we finished basically building about 5 to 10 minutes before we welcomed our first guests. So we were like, I was like on day one of our first retreat in June of 2018, I'm like, I went down to the ferry terminal to like, chat people up, AKA stall them. Well, the team was like sweeping up dust off the floors and like screwing in light bulbs and like unwrapping lamps and, basically getting our phase one off the ground. So that was how we got going. And then, yeah, man, from there on, it's just been pretty much, the first, I don't care what business you're in, you're likely to have the first year is going to be maybe 18 months is going to be a bit of a grind. So, that's how the first 18 months or so were with us. It was painful financially because we kind of based our prices on our expenses in Peru, but coming to Costa Rica, everything's like 4 times more expensive. So it took us a lot of time to get over the resistance of raising our prices to a certain level that would be enough to cover the sizable costs that we started to experience in Costa Rica. So for the first out of the first 18 months, we were in the negative probably 16 of those 18 months. In some months, we'd lose 50 grand in a month. So I'd have to like go and raise money again sell more equity, or borrow more money, or whatever, to just to get through payroll. So that was really, really challenging. And I think, anybody who starts a business and has succeeded will know that. And anybody who started a business and has failed will know that even better. But the first couple of years of a business can be pretty tense. And so we were actually just once January 2020 rolled around, we were just crossing the line into the black, right? We had a good January. We had a great February. February, I went up to the States on a business trip to Brian Rose and London Real launched their documentary with Dennis McKenna, filmed at Soltara, Reconnect, big premiere in New York City, red carpet event. And then I had a couple other events that week in the States, come back to Costa Rica feeling on top of the world. We finally made it. We've had a couple good months. We're finally in the black. Brian Rose just made a movie about us. And 2 weeks later, wham, borders closed. And then all of a sudden, 7 months of zero revenue and not knowing when we're going to open again. The pandemic hit, right? So it's I got back to Costa Rica at the end of February, and then 2 weeks later, it was there was no cases in Costa Rica. And then as soon as there was one case in Costa Rica, they just immediately closed the border. They trapped 4 of our healers here in Costa Rica for the next 6 months, and 4 international staff, facilitators, trapped here. And so we basically had to figure out how we're going to survive for the next however long with zero revenue and couple hundred people looking to get their deposits back, right? Because everybody was afraid, right? We had 250 people who'd paid their deposits and were booked in for that year. We had almost full bookings for the rest of the year. And then we're closed. And then so all these people were oh, we need our money back. And I'm well, sorry, man, we don't have it, because we were kind of still in that spot where we were trying to get our heads above water, right? So yeah, that was basically 2020 in a nutshell. And it just became a survival mission to get through March 14th until we opened again November 1st. But fortunately, most of those people were pretty understanding. I think we had out of those 250 something people that had deposits in the system, I think almost 200 of them left their deposits in the system, and they were okay, it's cool. You can service us when things kind of get out of the mud here. And so that was good. And it took us a while, but we paid out all the other people who didn't want to leave their money in the system. We had a set amount per month. But then, yeah, man, we got through that and opened November 1st, 2020. And things have been just pretty much hot ever since. The fact that there have been other places that have either not survived the lockdowns or have not come back yet has meant that our demand has just been astronomical. And in fact, we're basically sold out for the rest of the year. And, we have a lot of people on the wait list. So we're actually trying, we're in the final stages of closing a new property to actually open a second location here in Costa Rica. Hopefully,
whoa, that's big news.
Yeah, hopefully the next month or two. I haven't actually said anything publicly, but we're I literally just today had a meeting with the local architect, and he's going to apply for building permits.
Wow.
And yeah, should have some news on that within a month or so. Hopefully close the deal. I've already raised the money. It's just a matter of meeting the due diligence. And this place is it's really spectacular. It's on the open Pacific on a mile-long beach, surfable beach. So it's just a totally different vibe. It's like Santa Teresa undeveloped. And like it's
So
like
it's
the
on the
same.
other. Is it on the other side then of Costa Rica? It's on the opposite end because Soltara
No,
now is facing inwards. It's on the Gulf.
it's on the Gulf. Yeah. So then this is basically just kind of, it's about 90 minutes away by car.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
50 kilometers or less. I don't know, maybe 30 kilometers. I don't know, but it's on the, if you were to drive, like in the summer, you can actually drive in a 4x4 from Santa Teresa. It's about 30 minutes in a 4x4 north of Santa Teresa. So like basically the same, not far from Santa Teresa, but as the crow flies. But if you're taking roads and you have to cross the peninsula and then go up and then cross the peninsula again, it's probably 3 hours drive. But if that's going all the way around and all the way back. But when the rivers aren't high, apparently you can drive like straight up through kind of, gravel roads and crossing rivers in your 4x4 and stuff like that, straight north from Santa Teresa. But it's a beach called Playa Coyote, and it's a very popular surf destination for surfers who don't want to hang out in a party place, right? Like there are places there. There are like touristic establishments there, but it's really chill. But the beach is wide, it's pristine, it's long, the waves are great. This place is already a yoga retreat that we're buying, so it's like it's already built. We just have to basically put a maloka there, and a couple of staff lodgings. But it's like perfect for Soltara. It's just the vibe is great. It's already built up as like a same capacity retreat center, and it's just absolutely stunning and beautiful. So we've kind of like actually tried to locate a couple of other places since about January, because I knew we were going to need more space because we were just filling up, and like the demand is really high, especially as we continue kind of establishing ourselves in the field, but yeah, ideally, in a month or so, we're going to have like some like concrete news about this. And hopefully around January, we're opening a second location.
Wow. Congratulations. It's huge.
Thanks, bro.
That's so big. I mean, I don't really know of any ayahuasca places that have gone on to open a second. And this kind of brings me to a question about vision, like it sounds like you've always had a pretty clear vision, right? I think that's one of your core strengths, which is good as a CEO. You want to have vision. And when you started the place, the Ayahuasca Adventure Center in Peru, there was a clear vision for that, and you held to it and you executed and you built. When you had to leave that, you went into Soltara, you found the place, you executed, you built. And I'm curious, with where you find yourself now, what do you see Soltara becoming and sort of your role? Because one thing we haven't talked much about on this interview is you have your own personal brand. You have a podcast that you've started to host. You've written a book. You have now this new project.
2 books.
Starting to
I got another book coming out.
Oh, you have another book coming out. So you've also started a heavy metal band, Savage Existence. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on Soltara's growth and vision, but also you as an individual. What do you see yourself sort of growing and developing into?
Yeah, of course. So Soltara is, my interest in growing Soltara is not aggressive. It's not. I have no interest in forcing growth or causing stress or havoc for anybody who's in the organization. I pushed growth in the way of revenue when we were losing money every month because it was, everything was falling back on me to pay the bills, and I didn't have, if the revenue's not there, then I have to like go and like beg somebody for money to lend me money or like buy equity or something. So I pushed hard on growth when we were losing money, but now I have no interest in pushing hard on growth. Like I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to have 10 locations around the world. Like I'm not trying to be a chain of ayahuasca centers, a franchise. Like I don't want that. I don't even think that's right. But the reason we're growing now is simply because we cannot serve all the people that want to come here, and not by a long shot. Like I'm talking like hundreds of people who can't come here who want to come here. And we literally cannot even sell space because we don't have any, like for the next 4 to 6 months. So we're growing by absolute necessity at this point. Another thing is finding high quality staff is very difficult. It's very, very, very difficult. So, the last thing we want to do is wind up in a growth position where we don't have really good staff to fill it. So, this particular growth move is a response to conditions on the ground. Basically, we have a bunch of staff. We're not giving our healers enough work. That's one major factor, right? We have 4 sets of healers who work at Soltara, and they're not getting enough work. We don't have enough work to give them. So they want more work. We need to build another center to give them more work. And fortunately, over the past year or two, we've formed relationships with enough like facilitators and potential great candidates for like retreat director and all that kind of stuff, so that we now have enough staff to move into an incrementally bigger location, so it's close to Soltara in Playa Blanca, so we can kind of overlap some of the management. It's not like a totally different location where we have to have a completely different team. Like we can overlap, we can travel round trip between locations in one day by car. It's not that big a deal. So we're growing based on those conditions. But I think my vision for Soltara is not nearly as important as Melissa's vision for Soltara, because what she's, I'm more of a kind of boots on the ground guy, where it's like, I'm very much in the physical realm, and when it comes to my vision, I'm like the guy who goes to a place and sees how this place is going to look and envisions how it's going to operate, envisions how it's going to feel and stuff like that. I'm very experiential visualizer. That's what I've always been. When I got to that site in Peru, that's what I saw. I saw how it was going to look. I saw how it was going to feel, and I built it based on that vision. When I got to Soltara in Playa Blanca, I saw it and I built it based on that vision. When I got to Soltara in Playa Coyote, which is a place we're about to acquire, I can feel how that's going to go. But when it comes down to like the nitty gritty aspects of the work we do, I think Melissa's vision is really beginning to take precedent here, because she's the one who's going hard on the integration platform. Her and Sylvia are brainstorming hard on that, putting a lot of elbow grease behind that. But that's very much more in the way of detail orientation and in servicing where the market needs us to be. So I think we're kind of shifting gears a little bit to be more of taking Soltara in a digital direction, not so much in just replicating physical spaces and serving, ayahuasca medicine, but trying to help and serve the industry in a way that's a little more intellectual, therapeutic, and digital, right? And I think Melissa's going to be leading the charge there. So, which basically brings us to your next point of like, what am I doing? Because I'm essentially becoming irrelevant in this organization. If we're not growing physically, then, and if we're not like battling COVID, if we're not if we're not fighting, startup war, then if like we're in an era of peacetime, and that I'm kind of irrelevant in that space because, my approach is almost harmful in an era of peacetime. The brute force, the lizard brain, the I guess battle oriented mentality that I have, that serves a great purpose, and that's very valuable when it's needed, like getting us through a 7-month lockdown, for example, or getting us through an 18-month startup grind, right? But when we're getting into a place where we have more customers than we know what to do with, we have more staff than we can employ, and it's like now it's just about optimization and tweaking and serving the community and perfecting our operations. That's where Melissa's much more talented and skilled than what I am. So then what do? Well, I need somewhere to put my energy. So, we're getting into music, right? We're, me and Jesse, the chef from Soltara, we're friends from kindergarten, high school, public school, college. We played together, and we've produced an album, and we actually, the producer of our album was one of our old school guitar heroes from the 90s, Logan Mader of Machine Head and Soulfly and Once Human, and he's produced like gold albums for like Five Finger Death Punch and Gojira and like Cavalier Conspiracy and a whole handful of other bands. So I'm going to shift some of my focus there. I'm not going to abandon Soltara, but that's one thing. I'm also about to publish a book. So I actually started this new book called 12 Laws of the Jungle, How to Become a Lethal Entrepreneur. And I started that just at the beginning of 2020. So like that book was going to tell the tale of how Soltara came up and got through the startup war and my methodology for doing that. And then we got hit with COVID. So it became a play-by-play journal of how Soltara got through the COVID pandemic and lockdowns and came out stronger than ever before. And it really kind of boiled it down into 12 laws of the jungle of entrepreneurship, with a kind of unique take on it. And so that manuscript is done, and I'm currently in the publishing process right now, just completing the last few tweaks from their editorial recommendations, the edits, getting the cover locked in, etc. And then, I've got a podcast. It's not really my passion, but every now and then I run into cool people I want to talk to and ask some questions. So it's kind of like something I'm, like doing, I guess.
It's good to have a podcast. It's a great platform to have, like this one. This is what you get to have interesting people on. You connect, you have a cool conversation. Other people listen to it, and just for that in itself, it's a fun thing. And you've interviewed some incredible people for the podcast, and it's both in the plant medicine space. I know you recently published an interview with Matthew Johnson, who's a researcher at Johns Hopkins. But you've also published interviews with people who are not in plant medicine at all, who are entrepreneurs or just people that you find to be interesting. And it feels like you're finding your way with it, and it doesn't have to be your core focus, but it can be just every now and then something you pop into.
What's your advice, Paul, for I'm at a loss right now. What do I do with this podcast? Because it's like, there's two ways. In order to grow a big podcast, you have to do a ton of episodes, right? Like you have to really put the hours in, but then you have to find guests and you have to do research and you have to process the episodes. And, I like to have good chats with people, but what should I do?
Just as much as possible to delegate everything except just the conversations, right? If you can find yourself in a space where you're only having to show up and do conversations and chat with people who are interesting, like the audio production, the logistics of getting things set up, right? I have an assistant and an AV producer who handles all of that. So when I show up, like we're recording in Zencaster right now, and this is a little off script, but fuck it. we're recording in Zencaster right now. The recording will stop. My AV guy will come in. He'll do the cut. He'll get it up, and then my assistant will help with following up. If you can set up a system like that, right? It's just systems. Then and you just and I'm kind of jealous of you because since you're doing this podcast under Daniel Cleland, you can be very expansive about who you interview. Whereas for Third Wave, for this podcast, I've been very specific about this is in the psychedelic space, and I'm very interested in expanding outside of this as well. So as long as you're enjoying the conversations and they're interesting to people, we sometimes record once a week, sometimes I get it out once every 2 weeks, sometimes I take a month or two off. But I'm consistently showing up because this is still a topic of curiosity. At some point, it will cease. Psychedelics are even ceasing to be my core topic of curiosity, and I'm starting to expand outside of that into movement, into meditation, into breath work, into systems change, other stuff. And so I'm also curious, like, how do I expand outside of that? So that's those are my, I guess, words of advice for you.
And as you've proven today, you don't need to be in the same place with this beautiful painting in the background. And you get
Precisely.
that's my main issue is like, man, I have to be here in the middle of the jungle in Costa Rica in order to record an episode and have 3 cameras and have my producer and everything. Whereas it'd be much more convenient if I could just actually do it from my laptop, like what you're doing right now, or have a camera that I travel with and a mic, Zoom. Yeah, I think maybe that's
there you go.
Move.
And for some interviews that you get a really high level, top, amazing, whoever, you'll want to have that set up and you can set it up that way. But for other ones, if you're in Austin, if you're in Miami, if you're going to LA, bring a little set with you, set up a few interviews while you're there, sit down with someone in person and just record. Right. And I think that's a way to make it just a little easier.
Great advice, man. I think that helps me out a lot because I'm kind of at a decision point right now. So it's on the one hand, I don't want to be investing in this big production for something that I'm not really super, committed to. But then on the other hand, I don't want to quit because it's then we have these great conversations when it happens to be convenient. And it's but dude, these are good. This is valuable. This is fun. And I releasing these episodes. So like you're saying, every once, twice a month or 3-4 times a month, or maybe some months you don't do anything. And as long as you're not stressing out about it, then why not keep doing it? As long as it's, economical for you, you pay your assistant, you pay your AV guy. It's probably not that crazy. And if you're able to do it when you're on the road and you're not stressing about trying to be in this place at this time and coordinate all this stuff, then maybe it's not a bad idea to keep going and maybe amplify a little bit in a more convenient way.
Yeah, it's got to be fun. You got to keep it fun, conversational, open, which you do a good job of. So, with that being said, it's time for us to wrap this one.
Yeah,
it's almost. I know it's what is it almost 5 o'clock there? Are we we're in the same time zone? Yeah.
Yeah. 5 o'clock.
Yeah. End of day. It's a Tuesday. Daniel, thank you for coming on. If it's for people who want to find out more info, soltara.co. Is that Soltara's website?
Yeah, soltara.co. My website, just danielcleland.com. Or, social
Perfect.
media. We're all searchable and easy to find on social and everything.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Daniel, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the work you're doing at Soltara, for what you've built, before Soltara. Thank you for coming on. And I'm excited to be on your podcast in a couple weeks.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 21st.
Hell yeah. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date on the third wave of psychedelics, subscribe to this channel and visit thethirdwave.co, where you'll find plenty of free resources on intentional and responsible psychedelic use.